Well, hello there. It warms my heart to have you with me today, especially if you, like me, have seen your fair share of days and are looking for ways to embrace this stage of life with a sense of curiosity and boldness. I want to share a few personal stories about something that surprised me when I stepped into my late 70s. Over time, I discovered a series of freedoms in my life. Freedoms I simply never expected. Some arrived quietly without fanfare, while others struck me like a bolt of lightning. I'd love to tell you about 7 of them, and by the end, I hope you'll realize just how freeing this part of life can be. If you happen to feel a spark of recognition or excitement, please remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And if you're ready to share your story, leave a comment using my favorite new hashtag, Freedoms in Later Life. Trust me, there's plenty more to come. So let's begin by talking about a moment I had in my 78th year that set the stage for everything else. I clearly recall sitting in my favorite worn armchair. That day, I was having one of my periodic moments of reflection. One of those days where I look out the window and let my mind wander. Suddenly, it struck me that I was free from so many responsibilities that used to weigh on me. The first freedom I became aware of was the freedom to listen to my body instead of living by the clock. For years and years, I rushed to meet others' schedules. There were tasks at work, or groceries to pick up, or someone to drive to an appointment. But after I turned 78, I noticed that I could finally slow down. If I woke up a little stiff or had a sleeping pattern that was off, I wasn't at the mercy of an alarm clock or a pile of urgent obligations. My day could begin when it felt right for my body and mind. And it was so surprising because for decades, my schedule dictated me. Now, I could more calmly decide when to start my day. It's simple but powerful, waking up gently instead of feeling rushed. Granted, there are still errands, volunteer commitments, and phone calls from family, but the overall pace is much kinder and gentler. I never understood how relieving it might be to choose my own rhythm. Let me tell you, giving your body that grace is a tremendous gift. Next, let's talk about freedom from social pressures that may no longer matter. For most of my life, I tried so hard to fit in, to say the right thing, to avoid giving offense or looking foolish. But once I hit that late 70s threshold, I began to feel like I no longer had the same fear of what others might say about me. Sure, I still care deeply about kindness and respect, but what I discovered is that I'm perfectly comfortable cracking a joke or letting my opinions be heard without being so terrified of making a misstep. It's as if I realized that time is precious, and I'd rather speak my mind in a compassionate way than hold it in for fear of ruffling someone's feathers. This new boldness didn't appear overnight. It happened gradually. But I remember a dinner party with friends where I finally said, actually, I prefer to go home early because I was worn out. The old me would have forced a smile and dragged on, trying to be a polite host. Instead, I felt comfortable enough to honor my own limits. And to my surprise, nobody criticized me for being direct. They understood and simply said their farewells. That felt liberating. Another remarkable freedom was from the relentless chase for achievement. Now, let me be clear. Many of us still have goals and dreams even after 78. There's so much we can learn or do, but the kind of pressure we often feel in our youth, that scramble for promotions, bigger houses, or chasing external validation, It melts away as you find yourself living for genuine meaning rather than chasing a shelf full of trophies. I used to measure my success by job titles or fancy accomplishments. At this point, I'm more interested in how I can benefit others and keep learning. There's no need to impress anyone else. The achievements that matter now are soulful ones, helping my neighbor by driving them to a doctor's appointment, back when I still drove, of course, or calling my grandchildren more regularly just to ask them about their day. Those quiet, meaningful acts can bring a sense of satisfaction that overshadows how I once felt about professional success. It's not that I'm indifferent to goals, but I no longer let them decide my worth. That, in itself, is another level of freedom. The next freedom is something I discovered after a close friend passed away a couple of years back. Losing loved ones is a painful part of life, but it can also open our eyes to what's truly important. In my case, it awakened a freedom from bitterness and grudges. There was a time I held on to old wounds. I had my fair share of misunderstandings with relatives. My sister and I had a pretty big falling out in our 40s, for instance. But the more I saw how finite life truly is, the more I realized I just didn't want to carry those heavy burdens of anger around anymore. This new perspective let me reconnect with people in a more open-hearted way. I gradually reached out to my sister again, and while we didn't become inseparable immediately, the bitterness softened. Over time, we found ourselves trading silly stories again, reminiscing about old holidays and laughing in a way that felt genuine. And in letting go of grudges, I felt lighter than I had in years. That leads me to the next freedom, the ability to embrace simple joys without guilt. For so long, I fell into the habit of feeling that enjoyment had to be earned through a day of hard work. Even when I had a moment to sit in the garden and watch the birds, part of me felt I should be up and doing something more productive. Now, if I want to spend half an hour admiring the sunlight, or watch a documentary midday, or doodle in a sketchbook, even if the drawings aren't masterpieces, I do it with no shame. It's a subtle shift, but incredibly powerful. I sometimes joke with friends that I've retired from self-imposed guilt. The world doesn't collapse if I take time for myself, and I encourage you to do the same, whether that's enjoying your morning coffee while truly savoring it, or taking a leisurely walk rather than a power walk. The next freedom is freedom from the illusion that we have all the answers. Strangely enough, that might sound like a negative, but it's actually quite liberating. In earlier stages of life, I felt I needed to have it all figured out. From finances to family problems, I'd stress myself out, certain I had to find the perfect solution. Over time, though, I realized that it's okay to admit I'm still learning. It's okay to acknowledge that we won't have everything neatly wrapped up with a bow. This humility brings unexpected lightness. For every new puzzle that arises, I remind myself that I'm not required to solve it flawlessly. Yes, I can do my best, learn, and maybe seek advice from someone younger who knows more, or from an old friend who has a different perspective. The world changes so quickly, and as we adapt, we realize there's always more to discover. That approach leaves room for wonder and curiosity, which keeps life interesting even in our later years. Finally, the seventh freedom is the freedom to celebrate your own resilience. Reaching 78 or any advanced age is an accomplishment in itself. By this time, we've faced heartbreaks, losses, uncertain times, and plenty of daily hurdles, large or small. But we're still here. That resilience is something to applaud. I used to think that focusing on my achievements was prideful, but now I see that acknowledging what I've survived is a way of celebrating life itself. So, if you've survived an illness, or navigated a financial storm, or persevered through tough relationships, congratulate yourself. You have every right to marvel at your own endurance. This reflection isn't about bragging, it's about understanding your capacity, and that recognition can spark hope for whatever comes next. As you can see, growing older isn't just about losing things. It can also be about gaining new freedoms you never realized you had. Just to recap, we talked about the freedom to follow our natural rhythms, the freedom from social anxieties, the freedom from chasing external validation, the freedom from bitterness, the freedom to seek simple joys, the freedom to keep learning without having all the answers, and the freedom to celebrate resilience. I hope that you'll find as much comfort in these realizations as I have. Of course, there are still challenges. This age doesn't automatically erase all hardships, but I believe deeply that we can choose to embrace the privileges that come with the years. If this conversation has resonated with you, remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories and reflections. Let us know in the comments which of these freedoms you identify with and why, or feel free to share a freedom of your own. Don't forget our hashtag, Chaka Freedoms in Later Life, so we can find each other's comments and learn from one another. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I hope you walk away feeling that this stage of life holds treasures waiting to be discovered. Until next time, take good care of yourself and stay open to the unexpected joys and revelations around every corner.